Well, good evening. I know there's people out there because I saw you earlier, even though I can't see you now. Good evening, guys. Hello, welcome to Whole Vineyard Church. So good. Hey, one thing just wanted to mention, which is not the most important thing about tonight, but it's up there, is that we are eating together after the service. All right, well, I am, so if you want to sit with me, then there's lots of space. Anyway, really excited about that, so do stay. We're passionate about building community, and so many of the things that we talked about tonight are about creating those environments and spaces where people can come and just be known and know one another and be community. So that's a great opportunity to do that. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Josh, and I'm part of the team here, and really genuinely excited to bring God's word for tonight. I'm loving this series on heroes, heroes of the faith, ordinary heroes of radical faith, and it's been a pretty significant weekend for our family. We spent this weekend actually with my parents at my parents' house, and my dad has been a pastor, and he started leading his first church I think at the age of 31, which is 34 years ago, and he has led consistently 3 different churches over that time, and he's retired a little early due to health reasons. But yesterday we had a celebration, and I had the privilege of speaking at that, and just got to share really what for me, my dad is one of my heroes. What makes a hero? And there's a lot of leaders today, a lot of people in the church, a lot of Christians whose view of heroes is a big platform. Or a focus on themselves or charisma, gifting. They clamor to climb the ladder. And what I love about the series that we're in is that, and just reflecting on my dad's ministry, is that it's not about any of that. What actually Jesus looks for in success, in inverted commas, is very different to what the world views as success. And, for my dad's never really cared about the size of his platform or the reach of his ministry, or what he's cared about is the one thing, which is faithfulness to Jesus. And I'm struck by that. And a lot of people in ministry start well, but don't finish well. And I don't know about you, but I want to be the kind of Christian who finishes well, who runs the race and fulfills the call that God has put on my life. And the series that we're in is really trying to establish what does it look like to be all that God has called us to be. When I think of heroes, I think of the exceptional. I think of the miraculous. I think of the superheroes of the faith. I think of that which is unattainable, the way beyond anything my life could ever match up with. But what we've been learning over these last few weeks is that what qualified these people to be heroes was not their perfection. It was not their individual brilliance, but it was their simple obedience in significant moments to the voice and call of God on their life. And so many of the heroes that we read about in the Bible were deeply broken people. When you read the stories of Abraham, who I'm going to be talking about tonight, he lied about Sarah, his wife, being his sister. Jacob deceived his father to get the family blessing. Moses murdered an Egyptian. Noah got drunk and exposed himself. Yes, that's in the Bible. David committed adultery with Bathsheba. Rahab was a prostitute. And all this demonstrates that heroes of the faith are just like me and you. Meaning what? Meaning that God is looking for a new generation of ordinary heroes, not perfect people, but people of simple faith. People like us in this room who love Jesus enough to simply say yes to whatever he asks. People like us who fear God more than we fear culture or rejection or persecution, who resist compromise, who fight temptation, who embrace our limits, share our burdens, and declare the kingdom of God courageously. Richard Sibbes, I don't think that's how you say his name, he said this: the heroic deeds of these heroes of faith do not comfort the church so much as their faults and their bruises do. And if you're here tonight and your faults and your bruises are at the forefront of your mind and you have disqualified yourself from being a hero of the faith, you need to know that that does not disqualify you. This is a new day, and God has a call on your life, and tonight, if any other night, is an invitation to take your place alongside the heroes of the faith and step into the greatest story you could imagine. I believe that the gap between us and the heroes that we read about is only as big as our willingness or our unwillingness to say yes to Jesus. And so I'd encourage you, if you've missed any of this series, Please do catch up online. We've heard about Enoch, Rahab, Noah, brilliant talk last week from Jamie on Moses. And tonight I'm talking about the big dog, Abraham. Father Abraham. It's going to be a big one. In fact, I'm going to do this week and next week, part 1, part 2. There's loads about Abraham. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Abraham, he's one of the most significant and iconic cultural biblical characters. In fact, 3 of the world's major religions are named after him, culturally named Abrahamic faiths because of his influence and their connection to him. I'd encourage you to go and read the story of Abraham, God's promises to him, his remarkable faith journey throughout the book of Genesis. And the text we're reading from today is in Hebrews chapter 11. I want to draw out 3 simple lessons of faith that I've learned as I've studied this from the life of Abraham. So if you're making notes, get your pen, your iPhone, whatever out, and I'm hoping it will encourage you tonight. So let's read starting in verse 8. Let's unpack his faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. I love that final verse. I think it's like absolutely hilarious. Imagine this, so from this one man, and he as good as dead. Imagine Abraham getting to heaven and meeting Jesus. And Jesus saying, well done, good and faithful servant. And Abraham saying, I just tried to be faithful. And Jesus saying, you'll never guess what? They wrote about you. They wrote your stories down. Abraham said, can I read them? Yeah, sure. Okay, Genesis. Wow, oh my goodness, what a life story. Unbelievable. Anything else? Yeah, there's something in the book of Hebrews about you. And it's about that time when you had a baby and Abraham's reading it. Wow, look at my faith. This is incredible. And he's like, and so from this one man, and he as good as dead, Abraham's like, I think that's a bit harsh. Sarah didn't think so. Still had a little bit of vavavoom, if you know what I'm saying. Why did I say that? Anyway, I thought that was funny anyway. So what lessons can we learn from Abraham? 3 lessons, 3 mentions of faith. Let's unpack them. My first point simply is this: faith is obedience. Every single person has talked about this, and I think it is worth saying. Verse 8, by faith, Abraham, when called to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, he obeyed and went, even though he didn't know which way he was going. So a bit of the context, God is building a family through which he's going to save the world, Jesus. And he chooses Abraham through which this blessing will be distributed on the earth. And he appears to Abraham and calls him. Genesis 12, let me just read a bunch of verses which get us kind of into the scene because I think it's so significant, the call. The Lord has said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those. And whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. What a stunning promise. So Abraham went. This was before his name was changed. And as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abraham traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abraham and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. It's a stunning passage of faith, of calling, of risking everything, of obedience and of blessing. And my first point is this: faith is obedience. Faith is response. Faith looks like movement. We've talked about this in every one of our talks, but faith is an action. Faith is a doing word. It is a response to God. Faith for Abraham was a life turned upside down moment when God calls him to leave everything and go to a new place. And he does. For Abraham, his faith was his obedience to the call of God. God calls and he moves. How many of us have heard the call of God on our lives? We know deep down that he's spoken to us about something. He's invited us. He's whispered things over us, maybe through people. He's planted seeds within us. He's called us to a faith journey. For some of you, it will be like Abraham. God calls you to leave where you are, move somewhere, plant a church, or step into mission abroad. For others, God calls you to adopt a child or foster kids. For some of you, it's a call to ministry, leadership. For some, it's a business that's in you that needs to come out. For others, it's just a conviction that the way that you are living right now is not the way that he's calling you to live. I believe that God has calls and invitations for every single one of us to step into. And here's where faith comes in, because every step of faith we ever make always requires a choice. Do we say yes and act out of obedience, or do we stay where we are? And that choice is usually difficult because so often that choice is about surrendering what we hold dear. It might be a job, it might be some money, it might be a relationship or a house or a plan or a dream or our expectations or our comfort. The call of God so often requires that we let it go. We have to, because it's impossible to hold on to the past and step into the future. God said to Abraham this: go from your country, your people, and your father's household. Every step of faith requires letting go of the past. Abraham was called to leave everything. 3 things that's named: his place, his people, and his parents. Your place speaks of your country, your culture. His people speak of his community, his support structure, his security, his identity in many respects. And then his parents, his father, his family, his financial support. But hear this: in order for God to give him his new inheritance, a new country, a new community, a new family, a blessing beyond which he could ever possibly imagine, Abraham had to trust God with that. Let me ask you this question tonight. What are you holding on to that God is calling you to let go of? Because I believe that whatever you hold on to holds on to you. It keeps you where you are. It holds you back. For me, in my journey, there have been a bunch of significant moments where I have had to intentionally say no to something which has been very costly. I remember at university, there were a couple of relationships I had. One was a dating relationship. One was my best friend at the time. Both of those things were not healthy, and I knew they were holding me back from stepping into the full call that God had for my life. And both of those ended incredibly messy. And I'm sure I didn't deal with both situations right. But when I look back on it now, I look back at the hand of God in there, and I had to make a very, very difficult choice. And some of you are faced with that, and you know, like, the easy option is to stay where you are. But the call of God is on your life for more. Here's the next thing about Abraham's faith journey. I don't know if you noticed this, but he didn't know where he was going. One of the things that marked his faith was that it was a faith without sight. That's not to say it was a faith without vision, but a faith without sight. Paul writes this in 2 Corinthians 5, we walk by faith and not by sight. Followers of Jesus have 2 options for how we walk in our journey of life, and Paul actually sets these against each other. The walking is the same, the difference is what is guiding you. Paul seems to be saying that a life of faith is incongruent with a life of sight. In other words, a prerequisite for faith is that you can't see the end of the journey. You can't see how this is going to work out, or whether it's going to be successful, or where I will end up. For all of us, I know, in our lives following Christ, we wish we could see how it's going to end up. We wish we could see what happened if we make this choice or this choice. Lord, you call me to this thing, show me how it's going to end, and I will follow you. But it doesn't work like that in God's kingdom. We say, show me the way, what will happen, and then I will go. But Abraham knew that faith does not work like that. He didn't know where he was going to end up. God promises that he will show him, but not now. And so in moments like this, faith is confronted by the giant of fear in our lives. Do we trust God enough to obey despite our lack of sight, knowing that he has spoken? Do we trust that God is always good, always faithful, always fulfilling his promises to us? Some of you are waiting on God to show you the end of the story before you go. Let me say, that is not faith. And that surely does not make you a hero of faith. Faith is obedience, even when we can't see. Second point is this: faith is without sight, but faith is vision. In order to build a culture of heroes of faith in our church, we need vision. We need a vision of God. We need a vision of his heart for us and for our city. We need to dream beyond dream of what is possible for us and for our city, because God is the God of the impossible. Read this verse, the second faith moment for Abraham. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. He had the vision to look forward to a city with foundations. Faith requires vision. Abraham lived in tents because by faith he had a dream of a city built by God. When you have a vision like that, the tent that you're living in is not your destination, it's the stepping stone to a city. But some of us today find ourselves in a place that we would rather not be. Maybe a work situation, maybe a family situation, maybe a level of leadership. You're living in a tent and you're struggling because you want to be somewhere else. But in the kingdom of God, as we learned last week, the journey of faith is taken in increments, in baby steps. Small beginnings. How many of you know the only way to the city is through the tents? And I believe God is watching to see how we deal with our faith in the tent seasons, how well we steward the little that we've got, and if we do that well, he multiplies it. Some of you have just got a little bit of money, a little bit of responsibility, a little bit of leadership, a few followers, not many resources, and you're wanting more. But God would say, be faithful in the season that you're in, and he will go way beyond your wildest dreams. Abraham lived in tents in a foreign country like strangers because he dreamt of a city. Let me ask you this question. What are you dreaming of? Where do you find yourself right now? Do not despise the day of small beginnings and set your vision on a future dream, but live faithfully in the here and now and give it everything and watch as God multiplies it. Finally, my third reflection on Abraham's faith is this: faith is currency. Faith is currency. We shift for a moment in Hebrews 11 to Sarah, which is Abraham's wife, who is deeply integrated into Abraham's faith journey. And this is what it says. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Look at this. I've just been thinking about this. It's blown my mind. Here's a crazy revelation, I believe, about how faith works. Sarah was unable to have kids. She was beyond the possible time zone, and yet God did a miracle in her life, something beyond anything she could imagine. And she and Abraham conceived a baby. It's a beautiful story. But did you notice there was something that caused the miracle? Something that triggered God to do it. Something about her faith released the miracle in their life. What was it? Sarah was enabled to bear children. Why? The Bible says, because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. God did not do the miracle completely separate to Sarah. God does not do many miracles separate to us. It was Sarah's faith, particularly her thinking about God and his faithfulness, that enabled her to have a baby. Which tells us what? It tells us this: so often in life, the miracle lies behind our mindset. She was enabled to have a baby because she considered him faithful. Sarah's view, her vision of God, her thinking about the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God enabled her to receive a miracle. I wonder how many miracles God wants to do in our life and in our church and in our city, which lie hidden behind a wrong idea of God, or negative thinking about God, or negative thinking about what's possible, or negative thinking about what he can do. I believe God is calling us to have a nothing is impossible mindset, and then a nothing is impossible activity. I'm not saying at all that everything that God does is just dependent on how strong our faith is. It's not like we have to work ourselves up to have bigger and better faith. I'm just saying there's something about faith which moves God. There's something about when he sees people who take him at his word, who hear a promise, and regardless of the situations, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the age of the people, do you know what? Say, because he said it, I'm going to believe it. And there's something about his faith, their faith, which released that. Abraham and Sarah believed God and they acted, and God sees their faith, sees their thinking, their right understanding, their action, and he responds. This is the stunning truth that God works through people. He responds to people. He acts when we do. He moves when we do. And many of us don't step into the miraculous because of our wrong thinking of God and because of our refusal to say yes to simply the next thing. So what does it look like for us to become people of faith? People like Abraham who will leave everything at his word. People like Abraham who are willing to surrender and sacrifice and lay it all down, who are obedient despite every possible scenario and situation, who say yes to the next thing. And I believe as we grow in faith, as the heart of this series is, I believe that we are going to see more miracles, signs, and wonders than we could possibly imagine, because God is looking for a generation of people of faith. Will we be that people as a church? Why don't you stand if you're able? I'd love us to pray.